Hey everyone, this video is about designing rocket interiors. My rockets are designed as complete mini bases. I don't build actual bases anywhere other than the main and teleported planets. Rocket interiors are one of the few places in games like ONI and Factorio where you are rewarded for building compact and dense. I've tried to cram as much as possible into these, utilizing every tile and getting the absolute most out of each rocket. These designs are quite refined at this point. Some changes will be made in future runs, and I will talk about those toward the end of the video. The first thing you need to decide when designing rockets is your oxygen method. But before we can talk about that, you need to know what CO2 deletion is. CO2 deletion is one of ONI's jankier mechanics, where if a small tile of one type of gas, such as CO2, crosses over a tile that is outputting a larger packet of another type of gas, then the lighter packet will be deleted. This is by far the best way of removing CO2 or other gases from your rocket. It does not require another pump or a CO2 sensor, and therefore reduces both power drawn and grants you more space available on the inside of the rocket. There are three methods for putting O2 into your rocket. The first one, the oxygen diffuser, runs on algae and cannot use CO2 deletion because it spits out the O2 on the upper tile, and therefore you will need the pump and sensor setup to remove the gas. The oxylite bin and an external O2 tank combined with the gas output fitting up here both do use CO2 deletion, because with the oxylite bin it is spit out on the bottom tile. These two methods both have their upsides and downsides, and which one you choose determines not only how your rockets are going to look, but how your rocket infrastructure is going to look. Of these two methods, I prefer the external tank method. But as far as the upsides and downsides are concerned, the oxylite bin's downside, the main downside, is that you will need another pump in the rocket cabin to supply the Atmos suits. This pump is going to be much less efficient power-wise than a gas output fitting, which uses 60 watts for every kilogram of oxygen pumped into the cabin. Using a regular gas pump is 240 kilowatts for every half kilogram, and is much worse power-wise and will require a hamster wheel. You can get by with the mini gas pump maybe if you are going to use, if it's only going to be a single dupe rocket, but at the same time it's still much less power efficient because you're using 60 watts for every tenth of a kilogram instead of 60 watts per kilogram. The main downside of the external O2 tanks, obviously, is that it's an external O2 tank and uses vertical space on your rocket. The other downside is that these are very slow to load, and the large one, the 5-tile height one, requires 18 cycles to fully load. You can speed that up by using multiple inputs, and these will all input at full speed when this is asking for O2. It's not limited to one pipe in there. You can have as many loading as you want, and having 3 reduces the load time to about 6 cycles for the large and 2 for the small, which is much more acceptable. With oxylite, you don't have to worry about that, since a dupe can carry several hundred kg of oxylite into the cabin at once. Both these methods are viable, and which one you decide on is up to you, and they're both perfectly valid. So on to the rocket interiors themselves. This is my main rocket. This is a 4-man rocket. You will find that when you're designing rockets, you will likely wind up converging on this kind of design, even if you try to design something else completely from scratch. I tried designing slightly different variations, and I keep converging on this basic Z pattern that you see here, where they come up to the right and diagonal and then back up to the toilet with the rocket control station up here. In fact, on most of my rockets, the larger ones at least, you will see this section and this section roughly the same. It's really the middle parts that change a lot. Overlays real quick. Word about water. The amount of water you can store in a rocket is way higher than the amount of food and O2 you can store in a rocket. Like, this amount of piping is way overkill, but we did it because why not? You can have a fraction of this piping, and they will run out of food in O2, and the water will be only about to here. So this is super overkill. The gas is obviously less overkill because this is more O2 being effectively stored in the rocket, so you want that as long as possible. I have these both being fed into the vent before the suits, so I can load from either the gas output fitting from an external O2 tank or directly into the cabin. This was an extra functionality thing that I never actually have wound up using, but the way this is set up, you could, in theory, on another planet, hook up an O2 pipe straight into the cabin to feed the cabin if you so desired. Other overlays, not much interesting here. Star map location sensor, you just need to check the planet that you want things disabled. I leave the toilet not controlled because there are some edge cases that can be avoided by leaving it uncontrolled. For example, I once had a situation where there were like 4 dupes being loaded into the rocket. One dupe got there early, one dupe got there really late. The first dupe had to take a leak. The toilet was locked. You can figure out the rest. So leaving that uncontrolled does mean they will occasionally use that toilet even when instead of using the main base toilets, but in general, my transit throughout my base, which you can see in detail in the longer video that I did, is good enough that virtually never happens. If they do use the toilet rocket, there's generally a really good reason that they had to use it. Other than that, room overlay, we've got 6 from the Great Hall here, 1 from the barracks, and 2 from the washroom for a total of 9 morale. This combined with a relatively high decor, being 120 almost everywhere thanks to the back wall and this new wood tile deco that was added in Frosty Planet, which is excellent for rockets, makes it so I easily get 10 plus morale from decor for all my dupes that are working other planets, and it's like this on every rocket. Between that, between the room bonuses, the decor, and the food, it's not uncommon for my dupes to have easily 30-40 morale and having high or even maximum overjoyed chance even when they're out working another planet. Other things in here, Cactus is just generally overall the best decor plant because it has a really wide temperature range. It's it's very much fire and forget kind of thing, but you can use whatever plant here. A word on the substances I'm carrying. I'm carrying steel, cobalt, which is basically just any refined, highly conductive metal. So either cobalt or aluminum in this one. And this one right now is carrying ceramic because I'm in late game, but in earlier game, it would carry igneous. Just be wary of where you're pulling the igneous from, because if you're pulling it near a magma biome and it heats up the rocket, that can be a real pain in the ass because it's really hard to cool rockets. You basically have to put one ice temp shift plate in, and then it melts, and then you have to mop it up, and then you have to put another, it melts, you mop it up. It's really micro heavy, and you have to do it one at a time because if you do more than one, when it melts, the water will be too deep to mop it up, and then it becomes even more of a pain in the ass. So be careful with substances that you're putting in these bins. It's worth noting the small bins do thermally insulate. You can put really hot stuff in there and they won't leak heat. The big ones do. But the big ones store 20,000 kg and the small ones only store 1,000. So those are only really useful for storing small amounts of materials. We have plastic here, which is mainly for building steam turbines. Glass here, which is for building solar panels on other planets, and table salt along with basic rad pills. So a word on the salt and the rad pills. These are both difficult to control in terms of consumption. Rad pills, I generally just tend to overmake shitloads of them, and then only the people that actually go in rockets are allowed to consume. It does mean they wind up consuming them at home too, but I tend to overmake them pretty hugely. Use sage hatches, on pea dirt to get the coal if you don't have good coal on your planet, etc. Salt is a bit trickier because they will want to stock it at the main tables in the mess hall, and you probably don't care about +1 morale on your main base, but it's a really nice icing on the cake in rockets. The way I tend to handle this is I tend to make tons of salt, or table salt, when the rockets are landed. Like, I will stop everything else on the stone crusher, just make a shitload of table salt and load in a huge amount, enough for them to last a very long time, and then never worry about. This should probably be less than 1,000 kg, but I think this is on this run. This is the only rocket with table salt, so it being essentially unlimited doesn't matter. But 2 kilograms is obviously a huge amount because they only use 5 grams per serving, and you can see the little salt icons on the mess tables. This mess table functions just fine, even with the door up here, something which surprised me, but freed up extra space for a fridge up here. Note that the fridge is unpowered. It functions just as a storage container when unpowered. They can load in here and then take out of it just fine. It's a smaller footprint than using the ration box, which is horrible because it's too wide, and it's a 2x2 building for some reason, even though it looks like a 1x2 or 2x1. Rooms, again, this basic configuration of rooms is the 3 rooms that you really want, no matter how you arrange this. The +6 from the Great Hall, the washroom, and the barracks are always going to be the 3 rooms you're going to have there. Phone is the best thing to have in here for morale. It does take a good bit of power. It's the most power intensive thing here other than the suits, but it's still generally worth it in my opinion. Carpeted tile needs no explanation. Good stress reliever. I think that more or less covers it for this rocket. Let's move on to the smaller rockets, or the smaller rocket. So this is the only solo spacefarer design I currently have. I don't use this one very often. I'm not entirely happy with this because there's no bed in it. The bed is not missing is not a problem when they're just staying in space. They'll just sleep on the floor. It becomes a problem if you're using this rocket to land on a planet, because what'll happen is they have no AI. They're really dumb. Instead of coming into the rocket and sleeping on the floor, they will sleep on the surface of the planet, exposed to sunlight and radiation, get sunburnt, radiation sickness, unrested, too bright, and all those fun debuffs. So I'm not 100% happy with this, but there's no easy way, really no way at all, to fit a bed in here while keeping everything else I want in here. You wind up losing the fridge, and I hate having to move food in manually because I like things to be automatically restocked by dupes. I don't want to do any micromanagement regarding refueling in my rockets. It should all be done automatically. This has rad pills as well. I also gave it a bit of igneous so they can build ladders. This is on the beachhead rocket, which is used to, establish the rocket platforms on new planets. Quick little tip with that: use the Trailblazer module plus the rover, and that way you only have to send 1 dupe. And it's better than using the orbital cargo module, because the orbital cargo you can't target the locations where the metal is being dropped. So if you're on the water or lava planet, it can fall all the way to the bottom into the abyss. Whereas with the rover and the Trailblazer, you can target the exact location where both of them are going to land. So yeah, I still do use this for trailblazing right now, even with the bed issue. I'm trying to find a better solution to that. I'm not fully happy with it, but the Trailblazer rocket is a rocket that needs to be, especially on a rad rocket, needs to have the smaller one ideally, because of the amount of other things I need to fit into the rocket. I will be making another video in much greater detail about everything that goes here, including the rad refueling, if you're interested in that, by the way. Other rockets. Science rocket. Oh, I didn't do overlays, did I? So quick overlays. Gas over here. And water over here. Automation is again simple, and room over here is just a washroom. Oh, another tip, you can disable the hand sanitizer and it still counts as a room, and that way you're not using any bleach stone. And I highly recommend doing that because the radiation that comes through the rockets will naturally de-germ the hell out of anything. Just watch them use the toilet and then check their germs, and you'll see it'll go away almost instantly because of the passive radiation. Even a slight amount of radiation has massive de-germing properties. Science rocket. So this rocket I was relatively happy with this design, mainly because I managed to get the lab for the 10% efficiency bonus and the Great Hall in the same rocket. And this was relatively tricky to do. You basically have to do it like this. There's no room for a washroom or anything like that. But yeah, this gives you the good morale and the lab. If you do the washroom and the bedroom, you instead of the great hall, or sorry, the mess hall and the washroom, you wind up with less morale than doing it like this. So they don't need on this rocket. You know that not having a bed doesn't matter because this rocket never lands. This rocket is essentially designed to be stuck on a radiation or good petroleum engine, and then what it does is it flies around the map scouting things, and in the downtime when it's not scouting things, then the scientist that's in here can go ahead and make extra data packets, and then it comes back home for refueling, goes and scouts somewhere else. So this is two things in one. I'm really happy with this rocket, although it's a rocket that obviously has a limited lifespan. Once you've scouted the whole map, once you've researched the entire tree, you're done with it. But it's still a rocket you're going to have for a very long time, and is very useful. There's nothing specific I have in these bins right now, but I mean it really doesn't matter. You can just put more carpeted tiles here. Because as I said, this rocket doesn't land, so they never actually have to build anything. It's a space only rocket. Pipes are the same, like literally the exact same from the other rocket. My piping for all my rockets essentially is identical, except for maybe where the gas output fitting will be, where it can move a bit from side to side. Phone, bunch of extra paintings. This rocket has a ton of surplus room. Obviously that leads to a ridiculously good decor value, so morale is obviously going to be no issue in space. Other than that, everything else is pretty self-explanatory, just from what's in front of you. A little motion sensor for the light. Oh, one last thing on this one. For the plastic, the reason I don't use a bin here is because I don't want the plastic to be resupplied constantly from the main supply. Whereas on the other rockets with the bins and refrigerators, I want everything to be constantly resupplied. On this one, I don't. So I just put in a one-time insert of, I think it's roughly 8 tons of plastic. Gets you pretty much all the space research, assuming you don't really have much researched. It's like 7 or 8 tons. So I just do like a one-time insert of that amount of plastic. And that's it. Cargo rocket. This rocket gets a little bit more complicated. Again, same gas, same water. Automation, well, power is, nothing remarkable. Automation gets a little more complicated. The gist of this and the way I designed this to function is it's a one-man rocket. It still has the proper rooms. 2, 1, and 6. We managed to get all of them in here. Barely. This rocket has some conveyors in addition to the normal layers. But the way this is supposed to function, and the reason this has 2 suits, is so that if one person's already in here, another person can still enter if they need to for some reason. But for the most part, they shouldn't have to, because this loads from... This conveyor loader fitting loads from the storage that's out here. It's this one right here. This is an infinite storage rocket. You can essentially put an entire planet into here if you wanted to, and it all dumps on this door, which is normally closed. Right now it's open because we're on the main planet, and it all rests on this door. There are 2 conveyors. One comes from the main chute, and the other one comes from this here, which is manually loaded from dupes. And this is set here so they can load into here without actually having to enter the rocket platform or take off their Atmos suits, which, delays time. So that way, while it's loading all the metal from all the volcanoes that I have tamed, I can also have dupes that are, just mining out the planet and just adding, whatever materials like rock, clay, phosphorite, or anything else I might need. And those could both be loaded in just fine. Both come out the conveyor chutes, drop on here. When it lands at home, the door opens and everything lands here. This pulls everything out and puts it in both of these. We do a double unload, so it unloads twice as fast, and both of those go eventually down to main storage. But since they are dropped on the floor as well, it means I can have dupes issue a sweep command to make the unloading go even faster. So it's a really versatile rocket in that regard, maybe a little bit over designed, having both the option to manual unload as well as the automatic unload. But it's very functional, and I'm generally really happy with it. This just a little bit of plastic and tungsten and rad pills. I think I had that in there mainly for just doing repairs and building miscellaneous stuff. But that takes us to rocket number 3, or 4 really, 5, which is the supply rocket. So this is a one-man rocket that is essentially the opposite of the MCV. Whereas the MCV's main job is to land on a planet, build solar panels, build tamers, so it has, just the materials exactly needed for that. It has steel, either igneous or ceramic, plus the conductive metal, for the radiant pipes. This rocket's design goal is to carry all the random miscellaneous materials I will need for more complicated builds. So right now it has thermium in here, a ton of plastic here. Remember, on the MCV I only had a small bin of plastic. So this one actually has enough plastic to allow me to build plastic ladders. More ceramic, a bin full of tungsten, which is very useful because tungsten volcanoes are amazing because they let you do the thermium niobium loop. If you just have infinite tungsten and a little bit of niobium, you essentially can have infinite thermium and niobium as well. So I've started using a lot more tungsten, especially with its high melting temperature, and the fact that I've been using more and more hydrogen rockets recently, because steel can melt if it gets blasted by hydrogen exhaust a few too many times, but tungsten is got a high enough melting point that won't be an issue. And then this just carries a ton more igneous rock, mainly just for building insulated tile. I have some wolframite, which I put in there for building high temperature rails that I never really wound up needing because I don't actually usually put the rails directly behind the volcano in my tamers. A little more cobalt and steel, mainly just for repairing. I had some extra bins up here that I just kind of use for storing stuff, like if I want to pull something off the planet that doesn't require the absolute power of the infinite storage rocket, I can just load some into these and I can take it out. Again, piping is basically the same as the MCV. Nothing fancy to see there. Wiring is nothing interesting either. The rest is plainly visible. Alright, so this brings us to where I am making changes regarding these designs going forward. All of these rockets were designed on normal difficulty. I am currently doing a maximum difficulty playthrough, which has a much worse radiation threshold. It's very easy for dupes to get rad sick. I do have a plastic tile over here blocking this. I would be extending the plastic tiles to block more of it, and moving the power thing, to somewhere else. That's the main change that's going to be happening to these rockets. The other thing I'm planning on doing is I'm planning on merging this rocket and this rocket. So this currently is a 4-man rocket that just carries the basics to build, as I said, tamers and solar panels, and this just carries everything else but doesn't have a lot of manpower. So because I'm also going to be adding a lot more radiation shielding into my rockets, which is going to limit the space up here, I've decided what I'm going to be designing is a 2-man rocket that has a lot more storage bins. Basically, I want to have some of these other materials that aren't normally on that rocket in there, as well as better radiation shielding. So it's going to be, instead of being one 4-man rocket with the basics and one supply rocket that frequently winds up working with the main rocket to just make sort of a 5-man 2 rocket combined team, I'm going to start having 2-man teams where they each have everything they would need, and that everything is probably going to be igneous or ceramic, cobalt or aluminum as the second thing, then a large bin of plastic, a large bin of tungsten, um, a large bin of plastic, and then a bunch of small bins with other things. So it's going to look largely like this, just probably with two small beds and plastic across the top. But that's the main change I'm planning on making forward, is kind of switching from 4-man, manpower rocket and 1-man supply to kind of 2-man, more versatile rockets where they have more flexibility by themselves, and I can just land them both together if I happen to need a lot of manpower on one planet. So that just about covers it for all the rockets. The last one is the drill ship. I'm not really happy with this. I don't really know what to do with this rocket, because the fact that you have to put a drill cone forces you into a spacefarer module, so you can't use the small one, and there's just too much space. It's a drill ship. It's supposed to go somewhere, drill, for resources, load it into the cargo bay. And all you need is one cargo bay, because this will run out of diamond before this fills up, and you'll have to come back and refill that. Yeah, you just have too much space. I threw a bunch of paintings. These storage bins have been empty because I never, had anything to put in them. So yeah, this one is kind of like whatever. You can do whatever you want in it, because it literally doesn't matter. It's just, you only need one dupe in it, and other than that, it's that one is just, it really doesn't even matter what you put in it. So yeah, those are essentially the main rockets. We got the small one, the MCV, the science rocket, and the supply rocket. And together, those just make up my rocket fleet. I've become a big fan of rad rockets, but I do like putting the main building rockets, like right now the MCV and the supply are on hydrogen rockets, because I find being able to make multiple stops before returning home to be just really, really nice. Like, it's great to be able to go out here, then out here, then out here, and then come home. Whereas with the rad rockets, you're sort of just going out and back most of the time, unless it's two really close destinations. But yeah, all rocket types have their upsides and downsides, and I will be going over rocket types as well as the rocket infrastructure in a rocket infrastructure video, which I will hopefully be making next. So that's it for rocket interiors. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope this inspires you to make some really dense rocket designs of your own. You can catch me live on Twitch at SF Hobbit. I am streaming most every day these days, and will be for a little while longer, at least until the Factorio expansion winds up coming out toward the end of the year. So yeah, thanks for watching.